A German shepherd freezes beside a wooden wall in the bitter night of Duluth. His name is Shadow, and he smells a heartbeat where winter expects nothing at all. Beside him stands Daniel Cole, a suspended K-9 officer with no badge, only a choice. Behind the wall, a pregnant woman lies in the snow, arms shielding her unborn child. She whispers, "They wanted the cold to finish it." What follows isn't just a rescue, it's a quiet miracle. Subscribe for more true stories where compassion chooses to stay. The night in Duluth carried a lake-borne cold that crept under skin and into bone. The kind of darkness that pressed inward, turning empty roads and silent buildings into witnesses that refused to speak. Daniel Cole drove without the radio on. The dashboard lights were dimmed low, casting a dull blue glow across his hands on the steering wheel. Hands that were steady now, only because they had learned to be. At 38, Daniel was tall and broad-shouldered, built not with showy muscle, but with the dense practical strength of a man who had spent years bracing doors, lifting bodies, holding lines. His face was angular, clean-shaven, except for a shadow of stubble that never quite disappeared, as if rest had become optional long ago. A thin scar traced the edge of his left eyebrow, pale against weathered skin. A souvenir from a call that had ended badly and changed more than just the paperwork afterward. His hair was dark brown, cut short and functional, already threaded with a few strands of premature gray. People often said he looked calm. They mistook discipline for peace. Tonight, discipline was all he had left. The decision letter lay folded in the passenger seat, creased once too many times. Temporary suspension, failure to follow directive, excessive discretion. Daniel had read the words until they blurred, not because he disagreed with them, but because he understood exactly why they existed. Systems did not forgive men who acted before permission arrived. They only forgave outcomes, and only when those outcomes were tidy. In the back seat sat Shadow. The German shepherd was nearly 6 years old, large even for his breed, with a thick black and tan coat that darkened almost completely along his back. His ears stood upright even at rest, alert without effort, and his amber eyes tracked the passing lights with quiet intelligence. A faint limp marked his rear leg, the result of an injury from a pursuit 2 winters ago, but it had never slowed him in ways that mattered. Shadow was not a dog that wasted movement. Everything about him suggested intention, how he sat, how he breathed, how he waited. Daniel trusted Shadow the way some men trusted prayer, not because it was comforting, but because it had never failed him when it mattered most. They had just left the K-9 training center. Shadow's crate was still strapped down, but Daniel had opened the door so the dog could ride free. It felt wrong to keep him contained tonight. The road narrowed as Daniel passed the industrial outskirts of Duluth. Warehouses crouched low and dark against the wind. He pulled over near a line of abandoned storage buildings, stopping beside a tall wooden windbreak that had once shielded loading docks from lake gusts. He told himself he needed to check Shadow's harness. That was the excuse. The truth was simpler. He needed to stop moving. The moment Daniel opened the back door, Shadow stiffened. Not barking, not lunging, just a low, strained sound deep in his chest. A sound Daniel had heard only a handful of times in his career. The sound meant one thing, not threat, not prey, need. Shadow pulled hard against the leash, nose angled toward the far end of the wooden wall. His body trembled, not with fear, but urgency. "Easy," Daniel murmured, though his pulse had already shifted. He followed. Behind the windbreak, the world changed. The air felt heavier, trapped. Snow had drifted unevenly along the base of the wall, crusted and sharp. And there, half slumped against the boards, was a woman. She was young late 20s, maybe early 30s, with a slender frame that looked smaller than it should have, as if something essential had been taken from it. Her coat hung open, torn at the seam, offering little protection. Dark brown hair spilled loose around her face, tangled and stiff with cold, strands stuck to her cheeks. Her skin was pale, almost gray beneath bruises that bloomed across her jaw and forearms in overlapping shades of yellow and purple, old pain layered beneath new. One hand clutched her swollen abdomen instinctively, fingers rigid with cold. She was pregnant. Far along. Daniel dropped to one knee beside her, training snapping into place even as his chest tightened. He checked her breathing shallow but present. Her lips were blue, her pulse was weak. "Hey," he said quietly, voice steady in a way his insides were not. "You're not alone. Stay with me." Her eyes fluttered open. They were a soft hazel, glassy with exhaustion rather than fear. There was calculation in them, the kind that came from surviving too many moments where fear had been useless. "My name is Emily," she whispered. Her voice cracked, barely sound at all. "Emily Parker." She tried to sit up and failed, a small sound escaping her throat as pain cut through her effort. Daniel moved without thinking, easing her back, shrugging off his jacket to cover her shoulders. Shadow sat inches away, rigid, watching her with an intensity that bordered on reverence. His nose hovering near her belly, as if counting something only he could hear. "They didn't want the baby," Emily said, each word carefully spent. Her breathing hitched. "They said it would ruin everything." Daniel felt something old and heavy shift inside him. Anger, yes, but beneath it, recognition. "Who?" he asked. Emily's fingers tightened in his sleeve. Her grip was weak, but desperate. "My husband," she said. "His family." Her eyes found Daniel's, and for the first time fear crept in. Not wild, not loud, but cold and sharp. "They made me leave. Took my phone. Said I'd come back once I did the right thing." The wind cut harder between the buildings. Daniel could feel time pressing in on them. "I'm calling for help," he said. Emily shook her head faintly. "Please, don't take me back there." "You're not going back," Daniel replied, and meant it, badge or no badge. Her eyes closed again. Her lips moved once more, barely parting. "They didn't expect anyone to stop," she whispered. "They think the cold will finish it." Shadow let out a low, warning breath, ears angling toward the darkness beyond the windbreak. Emily's hand slipped from Daniel's sleeve as her body went limp. They'll come back," she murmured, just before unconsciousness claimed her. "They always check." Daniel Cole stood in the hospital corridor with his hands in his jacket pockets, shoulders squared out of habit, eyes fixed on a door he had no authority to enter. Duluth General hummed softly at night, machines breathing for people too tired to do it alone, lights dimmed just enough to pretend rest was possible. He felt the absence of his badge like a missing limb. Without it, he could not question, could not command, could not protect by procedure. All he had left was presence, and he stayed because leaving felt like another kind of abandonment. The door opened briefly and a nurse stepped out. Her name badge read Sarah Whitmore. She was in her early 40s, medium height, lean from long shifts and short meals, with ash blonde hair pulled into a tight bun that had begun to loosen. Fine lines traced the corners of her eyes, earned not from age but from years of watching people arrive broken and leave changed. Her skin was pale, her movements efficient, but her voice when she spoke was gentle in a way that suggested she chose softness on purpose. "She's awake," Sarah said quietly, meeting Daniel's gaze without asking who he was. "Not for long. Hypothermia and trauma don't negotiate." She paused, eyes flicking to the large German shepherd sitting alert by the door. "Your dog can stay. He's calmer than most people." Shadow did not move when the door opened again. He lay with his chest to the floor, and head angled toward the room, amber eyes half-lidded but vigilant. His presence seemed to slow the air itself. Daniel had learned that Shadow listened even when nothing spoke, and tonight that felt necessary. Inside, Emily Parker lay propped against pillows, wrapped in warmed blankets that made her look smaller than she was. Under the harsh hospital lights, the bruises were unmistakable. Her face, oval and delicate, beneath the injuries, bore marks that had healed halfway and been replaced again. Violence layered until it lost novelty and became routine. Her dark hair had been brushed back, revealing a faint cut near her temple. Her hands rested over her belly, fingers splayed protectively, knuckles raw and cracked from cold. She looked older than she had behind the wooden wall, not because the light was unforgiving, but because survival had finished its work. Daniel remained near the doorway, careful not to crowd her. He had learned, the hard way, that presence did not require proximity. Emily's eyes opened slowly. "I didn't think I'd wake up," she said. Her voice was hoarse, but steady. There was no melodrama in it, only assessment. "You did," Daniel replied. "Your baby did too." Her breath hitched at that, relief crossing her face so quickly it almost hurt to watch. She nodded once, as if filing the information somewhere safe. Sarah adjusted the IV with practiced hands, then stepped back, giving the room space. She stayed within earshot, pretending to check a chart that didn't need checking. Emily spoke in fragments at first, sentences carefully rationed. She told Daniel about Ryan Parker, her husband handsome in photographs, sharp-jawed, clean-cut, the kind of man who smiled easily in public and spoke softly to authority. At home, she said, he was precise. He never shouted. He measured. And he believed control was a form of love, and silence was proof of loyalty. The first time he hit her, he cried afterward. The last time, he didn't bother. His family, Emily explained, had decided long before she understood she was never meant to belong. They were well organized, well regarded, the kind of people who hosted charity dinners and spoke about values as if they were property. When she became pregnant, they framed it as a problem to be solved, not cruelty, they said. Necessity. Yet the baby would complicate things. Plans, reputation, money. They said I could come back, Emily whispered, eyes fixed on the ceiling. After I fixed it, Daniel felt something tighten in his chest, familiar and unwelcome. He did not interrupt. He had learned that truth surfaced best when it was not rushed. Emily described the night she left, not ran left. She waited until Ryan slept, took her coat, and walked. She thought distance would buy her time. It didn't. They followed, not loudly, efficiently. Someone took her phone. Someone else pushed her. She remembered the sound her body made when it hit the ground. She remembered cold after that, sharp and total, like the world narrowing to a single sensation. The wooden wall had been an accident. She leaned against it because she couldn't stand anymore. They said if I stayed there long enough, it wouldn't be anyone's fault, she said. Just the weather. Shadow shifted then, rising just enough to place his head beside the bed. He did not touch her, only breathed. Emily's hand drifted down, resting briefly against his fur, fingers curling as if confirming something real. Daniel watched the exchange and understood, with a clarity that surprised him, that the winter had not chosen Emily. People had. The cold was just convenient. A monitor beeped softly. Sarah glanced over, satisfied, then returned to her quiet vigil. She had heard stories like this before. Daniel could tell. What made her dangerous to cruelty was not outrage, but memory. And Emily's eyes found Daniel again. "They'll come," she said, not as a warning, as a fact. "They always make sure." Daniel nodded. He did not promise safety. He had learned that promises made too easily were another way of lying. Instead, he said, "You're not alone tonight." For the first time, Emily closed her eyes without fear. Shadow lay back down, body aligned with the door, an unspoken line drawn. The winter pressed against the hospital walls, but it did not enter. Ryan Parker arrived at Duluth General just after midnight, moving through the sliding doors as if the building belonged to him. He was in his mid-30s, a little over 6 feet tall, lean rather than muscular, with sharp cheekbones and a jawline that suggested careful grooming rather than genetics. His dark hair was neatly combed, still holding shape despite the wind outside, and a short, well-maintained beard framed his mouth in a way that softened his features for strangers. His coat was expensive, but understated, charcoal wool without a logo, the kind of garment chosen to signal restraint. Everything about him said reasonable, safe, familiar. He smiled at the front desk. "I'm here for my wife," he said, voice calm, warm, practiced. "Emily Parker. She's been struggling." Daniel Cole watched from the far end of the corridor, standing half in shadow near the vending machines. Without his badge, he was just another man in a jacket, indistinct enough to be ignored. That anonymity sharpened his senses. He had learned over years and one costly mistake that men like Ryan rarely announced themselves with anger. They arrived wrapped in courtesy. Sarah Whitmore glanced up from her chart. Her posture stiffened, almost imperceptibly. She had seen that look before, the careful concern that left no fingerprints. "Visiting hours are limited," she said evenly. "I understand," Ryan replied, nodding once. "I only want to make sure she's safe. Yeah, Emily has a history of depression. When she disappears, she gets confused." He sighed softly, the sound of a man burdened by patience. "I'm just relieved someone found her." Shadow stood. The German shepherd rose in a single smooth motion, placing himself between Ryan and the corridor leading to Emily's room. His ears lifted, body squared, tail still. He did not bark, he did not growl. But the air changed, tightening around him like a held breath. Ryan froze for half a second too long. "Whoa," he chuckled, lifting his hands slightly. "Easy there. Beautiful dog." He looked towards Sarah, smile returning quickly. "I didn't know this was a kennel." Sarah didn't smile back. Daniel felt it then, the familiar click in his chest, the moment when memory aligned with instinct. Shadow only reacted like this when something fundamental was wrong. Not threat, not fear, recognition. Ryan shifted his weight, stepping subtly to the side. As he moved, Shadow's nose flared. Up, the dog leaned forward an inch, eyes narrowing. Daniel caught the faintest change in Shadow's breathing. the way it deepened when he picked up something layered and old. Blood. Not fresh, not dramatic. The kind that soaked into fabric and dried slowly. And beneath it, something chemical, sharp and clinical. Sedatives. Daniel's hands curled into fists inside his pockets. Ryan's gaze drifted down the hallway, landing briefly on Daniel. Their eyes met. Ryan's expression flickered. Not fear, not anger, but calculation. He assessed Daniel the way men like him always did. What do you know? How much can you prove? Daniel didn't look away. I'd like to see my wife, Ryan said, tone still polite, but firmer now. I'm her husband. Sarah crossed her arms. She's resting, and given her condition, any visitation will require clearance. Ryan exhaled slowly, as if managing disappointment. Of course. I just hope she hasn't said anything confusing. And Emily gets like that when she's overwhelmed. She makes things sound worse than they are. The words landed with precision. Daniel recognized them instantly. Minimization, redirection, control through calm. A memory surfaced uninvited. 2 years ago, a different hospital, a different woman. Daniel had stood in a similar hallway, listening as a man explained away bruises with concern and composure. The report had recommended caution, de-escalation, time. Daniel had ignored it. He'd pushed, asked the wrong question too loudly, refused to let the man leave. The woman had lived. The department had not forgiven him for the mess that followed. Temporary suspension, they'd called it. Necessary distance. Daniel watched Ryan now and felt the old anger stir, not explosive, but precise. The kind that sharpened rather than burned. Shadow took one step forward. Ryan noticed. His smile tightened, just a fraction. I can come back later, he said quickly, when things are calmer. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a phone, holding it up as if it were proof of reasonableness. Could someone just let Emily know I'm here? No, Sarah said. The word surprised even her. She straightened, color rising faintly in her cheeks. Not tonight. Ryan studied her, then nodded, retreating a step. I understand, he said. I just want what's best for her. As he turned to leave, Shadow growled, low, controlled, vibrating from deep in his chest. Ryan paused, then continued walking, shoulders squared, dignity intact. Daniel waited until the doors slid shut behind him. Sarah released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That man, she said quietly, feels wrong. Daniel nodded. He is. Shadow settled back into a sit, gaze fixed on the doors long after Ryan disappeared. Daniel looked down at him. You've smelled him before, he said softly. It wasn't a question. Shadow's ears flicked once. Yet the name Parker echoed in Daniel's mind, connecting itself to the old case file he had never stopped thinking about. Different woman, same family, same pattern of polite destruction. The pieces were aligning, and this time Daniel knew exactly how dangerous courtesy could be. Ryan Parker did not enter the hospital the second time. He stayed just beyond the automatic doors, positioned where the security camera would catch him without giving him reason to explain himself. The footage showed a man standing still, hands in his coat pockets, posture relaxed enough to pass for patience. He looked up at the building, then down at his phone, then back up again, measuring. Daniel Cole watched the feed from a nurse's station monitor, at the blue light sharpening the angles of his face. He understood the gesture immediately. This was not concern. It was confirmation. Daniel stepped away and made the call he had avoided since the suspension. The number rang twice before it was answered by Mark Ellison, a sergeant with the Duluth Police Department and Daniel's former partner. Mark was in his mid-40s, compact and solid, with a square face weathered by years of night shifts and bad coffee. His hair had thinned at the crown, his beard kept short and pragmatic, gray threading through dark. People trusted him instinctively, not because he was warm, but because he was consistent. The incident that had hardened him most came 10 years earlier, when a delayed response cost a teenager his life. Since then, Mark measured time like a debt. "You're calling from a hospital," Mark said after Daniel explained where he was. His voice carried no surprise. "Well, that's not an accident." "No," Daniel replied. He kept it factual timestamps, Shadow's reactions, the smell of sedatives, Ryan's language. He did not ask for favors. He asked for attention. There was a pause on the line. "I'll come," Mark said, "and I'm bringing someone." Within the hour, Deputy May Landry arrived. She was in her early 30s, tall and athletic, with dark hair pulled into a low ponytail that brushed the collar of her jacket. Her face was open but guarded, eyes sharp and observant. The kind that missed little and forgave nothing without evidence. She moved with deliberate economy, each step placed as if the floor might change beneath her. May had built her reputation on process, on doing everything by the book, so no one could erase it later. They stood together near the corridor leading to Emily's room. Mark leaned against the wall, arms crossed, scanning the space. May reviewed the camera logs on a tablet, lips pressed thin. Daniel stayed quiet. He had learned when to let others see for themselves. Shadow lay near the doorway, body angled toward the hall, ears forward. His breathing was slow and controlled, but he did not relax. He had not relaxed since Ryan left the first time. The security camera pinged softly as motion registered again. Ryan returned to the edge of the frame, standing beneath the streetlight this time, his face half lit, half shadowed. He didn't approach the desk. He didn't ask to see anyone. He simply stood there, counting minutes. May looked up. "He's not here to visit," she said. "He's here to confirm outcome." Mark nodded. "If she dies overnight, it becomes weather. If she lives, it becomes paperwork." Daniel felt the words land with weight. They aligned too well with what Emily had said. Ryan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then at the building, then turned away, walking back toward the parking lot. Shadow rose immediately, his stepping closer to the door, body firm and centered. He did not advance. He did not retreat. He simply refused passage. "That dog knows," May said quietly. "He always does," Daniel replied. Minutes later, a nurse passed with a cart. The night resumed its false calm. But the sense of being watched did not leave. Inside Emily's room, Sarah Whitmore adjusted the monitors, her movements slower now, fatigue setting into her shoulders. She paused when she saw Mark and May, recognition flickering across her face. "He came back," she said. It was not a question. "Yes," May answered, "and he left again." Sarah exhaled, fingers tightening briefly on the bed rail. "She's stable," she said, "but fragile, physically and otherwise." She glanced at Shadow. "He hasn't moved all night." Emily slept, her face softer in rest, one hand resting protectively over her belly. The room felt held by machines, by people, by a dog who understood lines better than most humans. Mark stepped aside with Daniel. "I'm reopening the old file," he said. "The one that got you benched. Same surname, same behavioral pattern. We'll start with welfare checks and financial pressure. Quiet." Daniel nodded. There was relief in hearing the plan, but also something else resolve. This time, there would be witnesses. May finished logging notes. If he returns again, she said, we'll have probable cause for intimidation. Not arrest. Yet. She met Daniel's eyes. But the system is watching now. Outside, the wind pressed against the glass. Somewhere beyond the lot, a car door closed softly. Shadow's ears flicked, then settled. Ryan did not come back that night, and for the first time since Daniel had been suspended, he felt the shift not loud, not triumphant, but unmistakable. The line had been drawn, and this time, it was not drawn by a single man standing alone. The arrest did not come with sirens. It came with paperwork, quiet footsteps, and the kind of timing that suggests a system finally decided to notice. Ryan Parker was taken into custody just after 2 a.m., intercepted in the hospital parking structure where the concrete held the cold like memory. He looked smaller under fluorescent lights, his tailored coat replaced by a borrowed jacket, his careful beard shadowed by fatigue. When Deputy May Landry read the charges domestic assault, a coercive control, reckless endangerment, his face did not collapse. It tightened. Control, even then, was his last language. 2 officers escorted him away. Ryan did not resist. He glanced once toward the hospital entrance, as if measuring whether the building itself would intervene. It did not. It didn't need to anymore. Upstairs, Emily Parker was in labor. The delivery room hummed with practiced urgency. Sarah Whitmore moved with renewed focus, her earlier fatigue replaced by a clarity that arrived when stakes sharpened. Her sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms marked by faint freckles and the pale scars of old IV mishaps. She spoke to Emily with the steady cadence of someone who understood pain without dramatizing it, reminding her to breathe, to ground, to stay present. Emily's face glistened with sweat, dark hair pulled back from her eyes, a jaw clenched with determination rather than fear. The bruises remained, but they no longer defined the moment. What defined it was effort raw, human, unyielding. Daniel Cole stood just outside the room, back against the wall, hands folded loosely at his waist. He had learned not to crowd thresholds. Shadow lay at his feet, body curved protectively, ears flicking at every change in sound. The German shepherd's chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm, amber eyes tracking the door as if the space beyond it were a boundary he had sworn to keep. At nearly 6 years old, Shadow carried himself with the gravity of experience. His coat, darker along the spine, caught the hallway light in soft bands. He did not pace. He waited. Inside the room, Emily cried out once, then again, voice breaking and reforming like ice under pressure. Sarah's voice cut through, firm and kind. A doctor, Dr. Elaine Porter, mid-50s, short silver hair, and a presence that filled rooms without raising volume, entered and took position. Her hands were steady, and her expression calm, the kind earned by decades of outcomes both joyful and devastating. She had learned to honor the work without promising it anything. At 2:47 a.m., a cry cut through the corridor, sharp, insistent, unmistakably alive. Daniel closed his eyes. The sound went through him, not like relief, but like alignment. Something that had been off-center for a long time slid, finally, into place. Sarah stepped out first, eyes shining despite herself. "It's a boy," she said quietly. Healthy. Strong lungs," she paused, then added. "So is his mother. Daniel exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Shadow's tail thumped once against the floor, slow and deliberate. Minutes later, Mark Ellison appeared to be in a weird wall. At the far end of the hall, shoulders squared, phone pressed to his ear. He ended the call and approached Daniel. "The family's being brought in," he said. "Interviews, financials, prior complaints. It's wider than Ryan. It always is." Mark's square face softened briefly. You did the right thing calling it in the way you did." Daniel nodded. Praise still sat awkwardly with him. "I didn't do it alone." Mark glanced down at Shadow. "No," he said, "you didn't." The hallway quieted again, that peculiar calm that follows decisive moments. Then Daniel's phone vibrated, a number he recognized but hadn't expected. "This is Captain Morales," the voice said when he answered. Morales was in his early 50s, tall, broad, with a voice shaped by command and consequence. He had signed Daniel's suspension with visible reluctance. "We're reviewing your status," Morales continued. "Effective immediately, your suspension is under reconsideration pending outcome. That's all I can say right now." Daniel closed his eyes again, this time without bracing. "Understood, sir." He ended the call and leaned his head lightly against the wall. Shadow shifted closer, pressing a shoulder into Daniel's leg, a grounding weight. The building seemed to breathe with them. When Emily was moved to recovery, Daniel was allowed a brief visit. She looked exhausted and radiant, skin flushed, eyes glassy with tears she didn't bother to wipe away. The baby slept in a clear bassinet beside her, small fists curled as if holding on to something invisible. Emily watched him with an intensity that suggested she was memorizing every detail, yet storing proof against any future doubt. "They said he would ruin everything," she murmured when Daniel approached. "Turns out, he saved it." Daniel smiled, not wide, not performative. "He saved you," he said. "You did the rest." She looked at Shadow then, eyes soft. "He listened," she said, "when no one else did." Shadow lifted his head at the sound of her voice and wagged his tail once, restrained and solemn, as if acknowledging a contract fulfilled. Outside, the wind pressed against the hospital windows, relentless but distant, as the lights in the corridor stayed on, casting long reflections across polished floors. Daniel sat back down beside Shadow, content to remain exactly where he was. There were lights that belonged to shifts and schedules and orders. And then there were lights like this, kept on because someone chose not to leave. In Duluth, on a night that had tried to erase a woman and her child, the light stayed on. And because it did, morning would come. Sometimes the miracle is not thunder or fire from the sky. Sometimes it is a door that stays open in the cold, a light left on when it would have been easier to turn it off, a stranger who stops, a dog who listens, a heart that refuses to look away. God does not always remove the storm, but He places someone inside it, someone willing to stand still long enough to be used. In our daily lives, it can look ordinary, answering a call you almost ignored, checking on someone you assumed was fine, choosing kindness when fear tells you to keep walking. If this story reminded you that faith still moves quietly through human hands, share it with someone who might need warmth tonight. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from and which moment touched you most. And if you believe stories like this matter, please subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these lights stay on. May God bless you and keep you. May He protect your home, steady your steps, and place the right people in your path when the night feels long. And may you always recognize the miracle when it arrives, not loudly, but faithfully.